Although the primary purpose of an analyst is to produce finished intelligence products, as I just described, that's not something they do every day. Analysts also give briefings to a range of audiences. These briefings are usually the oral version of a finished intelligence product in that they should contain clear analytic judgments supported by evidence. Sometimes briefings are only 5 minutes long, and sometimes they can be an hour or more. Sometimes they're discussions across a tabletop, and other times they're formal presentations in an auditorium. On occasion, you might even have to brief through an interpreter. To make things even more interesting, occasionally I would be told to brief a customer on subject X only to show up and be asked to brief on subject Y. So being able to think on your feet is certainly a helpful skill for any analyst. During my career, I had the opportunity to brief very senior U.S. and foreign officials and numerous senators and congressmen. I've also testified before congressional committees in very formal settings, an experience I certainly don't miss. I said earlier that analysts play an active role in steering what intelligence agencies collect. We refer to that as driving collection, which involves working closely with places like the National Geospatial Agency, the National Security Agency, and the Directorate of Operations within the CIA, providing requirements, which we call tasking, for the information that you need to answer pressing intelligence questions. Being an effective driver of collection requires a sound knowledge of the various systems involved, as well as a strong working relationship across the intelligence community, and building both is a prerequisite for being a successful analyst, per my early comments about the need for organizational acumen. In other words, I need to understand the questions I need to ask, and then I need to know where to go to get those answers and how to get those answers that I need. Somewhat related to driving collection is supporting operations and operators. Analysts play a role in helping the DO collect information beyond just providing tasking. Analysts help in the planning and assessment of operations. They also at times provide direct analytic support to military operators in the war zones. Many of my analysts did tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, applying their analytic skills to protecting U.S. forces and furthering U.S. policy goals. Analysts also train throughout their career. All new analysts must take the intense, several months long Career Analyst program, a course which teaches the fundamentals of being an agency analyst. And then throughout a career, there are numerous specialized courses geared toward the various disciplines. One common trait of every good analyst I've ever known is that they are lifelong learners, and there are plenty of opportunities to grow knowledge and skills at the agency and to fuel that lifelong learning. From time to time, analysts also travel, domestically and abroad, and this was definitely one of my favorite parts of the job. The most common reason for travel is to go somewhere to brief on your account to U.S. diplomats, other agency personnel, or foreign partners around the globe. Sometimes analysts travel to the regions they follow to learn more about the language and culture. There's also opportunities for analysts to do the occasional tour overseas, but the majority of their career is spent in the Washington, D.C. area. One final thing I want to mention about how analysts spend their time is that they all ultimately must decide which of two tracks they'll pursue. Some analysts, like the world-class experts I mentioned earlier, choose the Senior Analytic Service path, or SAS, meaning they intend to stay an analyst for their entire career. This path requires them to fulfill extensive requirements and then apply to be selected to the SAS. Others, like me, opt for the management path and then must compete for successively more senior management jobs. Neither decision is absolute, and it is possible to move from one path to the other, but it's not very common. Both paths allow for, and in fact require, a range of rotations to different types of jobs, and each allows people to make critical contributions to the agency's mission, but in very different capacities. Making the right choice requires a good amount of self-awareness and usually at least 7 years of experience. The last question I'm going to tackle about what an agency analyst does is very difficult to answer, but I've been asked so many times over the years that I can't ignore it, and that's, what's an average day in the life of an analyst like? Well, no 2 days are alike, obviously, and no two analyst experiences are ever the same, but there's a general flow that held in every analytic job I ever had, and it went something like this. I'd come in early in the morning, log onto my computer, and read all the information related to my account that came in overnight. This information, which we call traffic, is a mix of classified and open source information selected using a standing query on the huge mass of data available. Now, when I started 25 years ago, I found the amount of information I had to sift through daunting, but that was before there was much of an internet. Now the flow is staggering, and just staying on top of it can take much of the day. After going through as much traffic as I could, I'd meet with the other analysts on my team and our team chief for our morning meeting, where we'd discuss the highlights of the information we'd all just waded through, paying particular attention to any stories that might meet the threshold and require us to write something that day for the PDB, the Wire, or another publication. After the morning meeting, each day could be wildly different. If I had to write a piece of current intelligence, that would take up my day and potentially much of my night. If there was nothing to write, I might do research for a longer paper, work with collectors, support operators, or do any of the other tasks I've already mentioned. I might also be away in a class or on a trip. It goes without saying that there were always meetings to attend as well. But I'd say the main hallmark of a typical day was that beyond the morning meeting, each one could be very different than the next. I'm going to shift gears now and focus on my opinion of the analyst job and what it has to offer you. I'll start with the good stuff and talk about why I loved my 22-year career and give some specific examples from my own experience. I hope you find it useful.